The non-conference is over. The calendar has turned. And this week, West Coast Conference play begins. Welcome all in to the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer, and we are finally here. We are finally to conference play. We have entered 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. And I'm excited that we're finally able to dive into the conference matchups, get it going. We are only a couple months away from Las Vegas. The countdown is on to the NCAA tournament, and I think this is going to be one of the more fascinating WCC seasons we've seen in a long, long time. Before we get any further, be sure to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite streaming service, podcast service. And go ahead and follow on social media at Post by Zach, and then also additionally on Twitter for the podcast, Unoff WCC Pod. Go ahead and follow there as well. A lot happened last week. There's a lot that's going to happen this week, so we're going to get into Gonzaga's loss to San Diego State and what all that means. St. Mary's rebounds after a not so good loss to Missouri State. WCC play begins this week. Again, I'm going to dive into all of that as well. And a couple of surprises as we go into WCC play as well. Some other stories and whatnot to kind of keep track of as we go along. We're also going to I'll revisit my preseason picks for the awards and also the standings and see how I feel about them going into conference play now that we've gotten to see a couple of months of these teams going at it and have a better idea of maybe who these teams are going into league play. But before I do any of that, I want to begin with the team that has very quietly gone about their business. It is the team with the WCC's best record. It is the team with the league's best net rating going into conference play. And that is not the Gonzaga Bulldogs, not the St. Mary's Gales. It is the San Francisco Dons. They are 11-4 going into league play. They have the league's best net rating at 39. They have an adjusted defensive rating on KenPom of 15th in the nation. And they have won 3 in a row by an average of 36 points. Yes, those opponents haven't been very good, but they've been handling what they need to handle. They have the second lowest opponent points per game in the WCC at 59. They are third in the WCC in opponents' field goal percentage. That is also at 39%. They have the league's best field goal percentage on the other side. They also have the league's best turnover margin at +3, where no other WCC team is actually even in the positive. They're first in assists. They're first in steals. A lot has been going well for USF, and this, again, very quietly, USF has kind of gone about their business. They haven't picked up that marquee win, which is still a troublesome thing for USF, but they've put themselves in a very good position, and a lot of their guys are playing well. Marcus Williams, the team leader in scoring right now, 14 points a game, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals. Jonathan Mobo, maybe the greatest revelation of WCC of the non-conference, 13.7 points a game, 10 rebounds a game. He leads the league in field goal percentage. He leads the league in steals per game. He's 4th in blocks. He's also dishing out 3 assists a game. He's kind of been doing it all for USF. Malik Thomas, who I highlighted before the year as being one of those guys who could really make an impact early, and over the last 7 games, we've definitely seen it. 6 of his last 7 have been in double figures, double figure scoring, 14 points. This is coming off the bench. This is a team that think we need to start paying attention to a lot more, especially considering the struggles of St. Mary's and the struggles of Gonzaga over all of the non-conference. USF might be the deepest team in the league. They legitimately do run 9-10 players deep. Guido Newberry has been a huge piece to the success of this team. He's shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three. Mike Sharovjumps, who a lot of people were high on going into the year, has not. I don't think he's quite gotten there on the shooting side yet, but he's definitely been the playmaker I think that USF was expecting them to have. Ryan Beasley, the freshman, like he has also been very good for the Dons off the bench. Just another guy that they can point to. He's shooting 45% from three, averaging almost 7 points off the bench. This USF team I think is going to be in the hunt in the conversation to not only kind of sneak back into the NCAA tournament picture, which again, they're 39 in the net. They could pick up a few wins and really actually put themselves in the conversation. I don't think they can be ignored anymore as a possible winner of the WCC, which is a crazy thing to think about, which is just not something that we've had to talk about over the last 20 years, 25 years of anybody other than St. Mary's or Gonzaga winning the WCC. And that really has been the only teams who have won a regular season title over the last 25 years. Well, I think you have to go all the way back to 2002 to find a regular season champion that wasn't one of those two teams. And one of the things I really like about this USF team that I don't think that Gonzaga has, I don't think that St. Mary's has, I don't think that LMU has, I don't think that even Santa Clara has, are a number of guys who can create their own shot. I think USF has about 4 of them who can really create their own shot. I look at someone like Marcus Williams. He can create his own shot. Malik Thomas can create his own shot. I think Jonathan Mobo, to an extent, can create his own shot. Mike Sharovjumps can get the shot. He hasn't been able to make it yet, but he can create the shot. I mean, you can make the case. Maybe Ryan Beasley's starting to get to that level as well. But there's a number of guys on this team I think that are good creators. And that's something that this team has been not necessarily missing, because the last few years, obviously, you had Khalil Shabazz, you had Bouye, you had Ty Roberts last year. You had guys who can create their own shots, but now it seems like there's a depth of guys who can do that for this USF team. And one of the things I really do like is also the fact that they've been so good defensively and they're so versatile. They may not be the biggest team. They don't have a ton of size, but they have so many interchangeable parts, and they're so fat and they're so quick and versatile and athletic that it does make it a real challenge actually match up against this team. And remember that, yes, they had picked up a few losses and they haven't gotten over the hump yet for picking up those big wins. They've only lost these 4 games by 21 points. It's not like USF hasn't been in these games. They lost to Utah State by 1. They lost to Grand Canyon by 4. They lost to Boise by 5. Yeah, they did lose to Arizona State on the road, and that's sort of kind of like up in the air about how good that game's going to be. They did beat Arizona State, did go and beat Stanford at Stanford, and then Stanford wouldn't beat Arizona. So there's at least some level of like, well, you beat this team and that beat this team and that beat this team. So maybe Arizona State will start to help USF out a little bit more on that front. But USF is doing a lot of things well right now. And they're going to have opportunities early on in conference play to show that maybe they can do a little bit more. Because as of right now, they're not going to sugarcoat this. they haven't done enough to be in the at-large conversation. Metrically, they're in there. Metrically, they're making sense. But where's my Q1 victory? Where are the wins, the big wins that show me that you belong in that conversation? USF doesn't have it right now. And so as far as like looking at that, and I'll get into the whole conversation about their metrics and like what they're still missing, everything else, but because they also are other challenges. It's not like that USF is devoid of not having something that is going to challenge them as they get deeper in the conference play. They're not terribly deep at the 4 and the 5. Once you get by Jonathan Mobo, once you get by some of the other size that they have on the team, which really isn't a ton, this is going to be a challenge for USF. I think as they see St. Mary's and Gonzaga, especially because those teams are so big. And I don't know if they could, if Mobo gets in foul trouble, can they really keep up with what St. Mary's and Gonzaga is going to do? Because obviously we know what St. Mary's is going to throw Mitchell Saxon at you. They're going to throw Joshua Jefferson. They're going to be able to throw Harry Wessel. You look at Gonzaga, it's going to be Anton Watson, Graham Ike, Ben Gregg. You're going to have Braden Huff is going to come in there. It's like there's so many guys with not only size, but skilled size that USF is going to have to match up with, and foul trouble against those teams is, I think, the biggest hurdle. If they can keep Mobo on the floor, and he hasn't been in too much foul trouble. He's been in foul trouble in a couple of games, and you could make the case that actually has cost them in those contests. But overall, he's been pretty good about staying out of it. And he being on the floor just makes this a different team. Much like a couple of years ago, USF was a different team when Yawin Masalski was on the floor. Because we had seen that team with Jamari Bouye and Khalil Shabazz before, and they had a ceiling. They had a ceiling of where they could get. Once they solidified the interior is what made the difference for that squad. And that's, to me, is going to be the key to the difference this year. And I said that before the year, that I thought that was, if nothing else, that was going to be the most important thing for this USF team going in. The defense, and especially on the interior, what you can do inside in the paint. And Mobo has been, to this point, everything they could have hoped for. So that's one of the challenges I see for USF going into conference play. The other one, and I think this is a challenge for a lot of teams in the WCC right now. You don't have a 1A guy. You don't have someone who night in, night out, I can give them the ball and let them make decisions in crunch time. Because right now, who has the ball in their hands, right? We've seen it be Marcus Williams. A lot of times it's been Mike Sharavjam. Sometimes especially recently, sometimes it's been Malik Thomas. It's moved around a little bit, and no one has completely just grabbed that by the throat and said, this is going to be my role. This is how this is going to go. So that, I think, is a continued learning challenge for USF as we go through conference play, because that is something that needs to be addressed. Again, a lot of teams in the WCC need to address that as well. But if that gets solidified, if they can figure out who their 1A guy is, it's going to change a lot for this Dons team, for what their outlook in conference is, because I do think that they have a legitimate shot at breaking into the top 2 in the league. I think it's a real thing, let alone also get back to the NCAA tournament, which work to do, but is a real thing at this stage. And so thinking about a couple of those things, talked about they haven't done enough on the at-large front. They haven't. And I brought this up last week, that there's something to be said about what you have to do to impress the committee enough to get in. USF right now is 9-0 against quad 3 and quad 4. So they've handled the business they need to handle. They're 1-1 in quad 2s with 3 more to come. They're 0-3 in quad 1s with 2 more to go as of right now. Over the last 3 years, each of the 108 at-large selections have had at least one quad 1 victory. At least one. But to be safe, 105 of the 108 have had at least 2. And I think that's where you need to look at. USF, again, only has 2 more shots at a Q1 right now. And I think you can kind of guess who those 2 might be. The challenge for them is going to be no slip-ups in WCC play. That means you have to handle your business against the bottom tier of the league, your San Diegos, your Pacifics, your Portlands, and your Pepperdines. That has to be straight out 8-0. You cannot lose to one of those teams. Additionally, you have to then take care of the teams that are going to be on that border. Like LMU is a good enough team to definitely knock off any one of the top tier teams in the WCC. But they metrically are going to just crush anybody who potentially loses to them. So that's another situation where San Francisco has to handle their business, even against LMU, even if that's a tougher, to me, it's like far tougher opponent than any of those other teams I mentioned before. So you have to handle that. Santa Clara we know is going to be tough, and I know metrically they're still going to count as a Q2 on the road. They're going to count as the Q3 at home. But you got to handle those, and then that leaves St. Mary's Gonzaga. You have 5 in-conference Q2, Q1 opportunities. Both St. Mary's games, both Gonzaga games, and then the road game against Santa Clara. To me, if everything goes well, this is where the ideal situation for USF is. This is how I would see it. For borderline consideration, I think they would need at least 1 win against either St. Mary's or Gonzaga, and then nothing otherwise. So that means that either they can be 13-3 or maybe at worst 12-4 in conference play. So going into Vegas, they either have to be 23-8 or 24-7, which I think is a doable thing for USF. But again, that is borderline consideration for the NCAA tournament. That is a separate conversation than I think that what they could be and their chances of winning in Vegas are, because I think all bets are off right now for Vegas, because we've seen the struggles and the limitations of Gonzaga. We've seen the struggles and the limitations of St. Mary's. We've seen the inconsistencies of Santa Clara. The only thing I think we have not seen from USF is their ability to close out close games against good opponents. That is the thing we have not yet seen. We've seen Gonzaga do that. We've seen Santa Clara do that. We've seen St. Mary's do that. They have all been able to close out close games. USF has not had opportunities to do that against good opponents yet. Or they have had those chances. They haven't come through in those chances. So this is where USF is. I think going into conference play, they are looking good. I think they have a shot not only at the league title, but also potentially outside at large chances. But they have to handle their business, and it does start in the next couple weeks. This week they only have the game against Pacific. Then next week they'll be at San Diego and against Portland. Then they play LMU before they then see and back-to-back St. Mary's and Gonzaga. So the chances for USF are coming, and they're coming soon. But they have to handle their business before they get to those two games against the Gales and the Zags. And speaking of the Zags, for those who were paying attention over the holiday weekend, or right before the holiday weekend, Gonzaga lost in the kennel. In case you did miss it, they did lose to San Diego State over the weekend, and this was a game that I thought was going to be very close. It was very close for the longest of times, but this was a contest where Gonzaga led by 8 in the first half, and then San Diego State went on a run, took the lead right before the half, and then ended up 15 midway through the second half. Gonzaga did storm back to make it close, but the Aztecs ended up winning this one by 10. This was the second highest opponent field goal percentage that Gonzaga had allowed this year. 50% for San Diego State shot for 50% from the field. UConn was the only one who had shot better so far this year. Ike and Watson played pretty well. 14 for 23. They combined for 36 points, 14 rebounds. But one of the things that has been a continued concern on the squad has been, where is the offense coming other than them? Or even night to night, it's been an issue with not as much Watson, but every so often Ike hasn't been as efficient as we are used to seeing him. The rest of the team on Friday shot 31% from the field, 22% from three. They haven't shot better than 30% from three since December 5th. And over that period of time, last 5 games, that they've shot 24% from three. And maybe one of the more shocking parts of that is Ryan Nembhard. This was a guy who was shooting mid 30% from three last year. So far this year, he is shooting 15% from three. He has missed his last 15 attempts. He hasn't made one since December 5th. And I know I was among the people who thought that Nembhard coming to the Zags was going to solve a lot of their problems. They didn't have a true point guard. This was going to solve that. They had someone who could take over games late. And we've seen that from time to time from him as well so far this year. But it has been inconsistent. His shot just has not come around, especially over the last month or so, where it seems like he's moving backward on that front. And it's cost Gonzaga probably a couple of games. It probably cost them, I don't know, I'm not putting it all on Ryan Nembhard. Not like that's unfair. But what is happening is that his inability to make shots is obviously having then an effect for everybody else, because it puts more pressure then on Nolan Hickman, puts more pressure on Dusty Stromer, puts more pressure on Braden Huff. It puts more pressure on Ben Gregg. It puts more pressure on everybody else to then pick up some of that slack and be able to actually come through overall. Because the one thing, Gonzaga has not shot the three well at all this year, and that's still a huge concern for this team. Again, mentioned like they haven't shot over 30% from three in almost a month, and that is a concerning thought as they go into conference play, that is not mattered by the opponent. This has been against everybody. It's not just against the San Diego States. It's not just against the UConns. This has happened against the Mississippi Valleys. This has happened against some of the other opponents that they've had. It's like, this is not a one-time thing. This happened against Jackson State. It happened against Bakersfield. So it is a concern. And then it begs the question of, what is this Gonzaga team missing? Because we've talked like years past, especially of the recent vintages. This is a team that has been expected to be not only in a title conversation, They've been a regular in the Sweet 16. They've made 2 different title game appearances. This team knows how to win against the best teams, but one of the things that is very different from all those teams to this one, 2 things really. One is the depth, which we've talked to death about, but the other one, and this has been a saying for a while, but I think they're finally missing it. The Zags don't have a dude. And they don't. That, I think, is maybe the one thing that is actually truly missing from this squad. You have a lot of very good players on this team, a lot of guys who are going to contribute to winning teams. But what you don't have is the one guy on their team that just strikes fear into their opponents. And that was a number of guys over the years. You could say that was Drew Timme. You could say that was Jalen Suggs. You could say that was Nigel Williams-Goss. There are so many guys throughout the years where you could say oh, that's the guy I was scared of on that team. I don't know if that guy is on this squad right now. From time to time, it has been Nembhard, but not consistently. From time to time, it looks like maybe it was going to be Graham Ike, but not consistently. Anton Watson is not that guy. We know that Nolan Hickman is not that guy. And really, that's as far as you can go with this roster, because everybody else is either in a role playing mode, or there's just not the depth there. As we even saw it against San Diego State, where really that they only win about 7 deep, and the 8th guy Yo did get into the game against San Diego State, but he played all of 7 minutes. And that was really because Dusty Stromer had picked up that technical, and they were starting to mix and match a little bit more. And the Dusty Stromer technical, I know it was a little bit of a soft one, but it also is, you can't do that. That is a freshman mistake. Mark Few laid into him. He didn't play the rest of the game, which may have been a little much, but that's a clear freshman mistake. Even if it shouldn't have been called, it happened, and he should know better than to not do that. But this Gonzaga team, they have been it's not an offensive rut, but they are inconsistent in what they are, and maybe the mindset of how they go about their offense needs to change a little bit more, because if the shots are not falling from 3, you may need to readjust. Because if it continues, if that persists, as we saw with St. Mary's even last year when they had an inability to shoot the 3, all then you have to do is start to pack the paint and make it harder and harder to score inside, and just force teams and force Gonzaga to shoot 3 after 3 after 3, knowing that it's not going to make a difference for the Zags. And there's going to be time for the Zags to work some things out, because they do start pretty soft in the WCC schedule. First 5 games, they have Pepperdine twice, San Diego twice. They are going to be going to the Levy Center to take on Santa Clara, which I think is going to be a really good game. I think that's going to be a fun matchup to see how the Broncos handle that squad. Also, because I think Santa Clara is maybe the one team in the WCC. I talked about the lack of 1A guys. They might have the only one right now in Adama Ball. So we'll talk a little bit more about that matchup next week, because I think that's going to be really interesting to kind of see how that game goes, because Santa Clara is in for a rough week. They have both the Zags and the Gales at the Levy Center next week. So with Gonzaga right now, their metrics are also starting to slip. They're slipping, and talked about it last week. Part of it is out of their control. Part of it has been because UCLA has not been the team that we all thought they would be, because USC has not been the team we thought they would be. because Yale has started to slip, because and then the rest of their schedule, at least the opponents they have beaten, are not good. They just aren't. Bakersfield, Jackson State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Mississippi Valley, these are not good teams. And the fact of the matter is Gonzaga has yet to beat a good team, a truly good team, a tournament level team. They haven't beat one. And that's why there's concern over Gonzaga's potential NCAA tournament hopes. And yes, it's been a while since we've had the talk about Gonzaga may not make the NCAA tournament because of their schedule, which sounds ludicrous, which sounds ridiculous. But right now, it is a bit of a reality. Because right now, they, like I mentioned about USF, lack a Q1 win. They're 0-4 in Q1. Washington's San Diego State would have been a Q1 victory. Washington was a Q1 loss. UConn, Purdue, again, like I think those were essentially scheduled losses. You kind of write those off. But you need somebody, but then you are starting to run into the problem that you lack a lot of chances. They have only 3 left as of right now on the schedule. That's at Kentucky, and that one's going to be in early February. But then after that, it's going to be at USF, at St. Mary's, the last week of conference play. Those are your last 2 opportunities, assuming you don't see one of them in the WCC tournament, which you likely will. So this becomes a challenge. They have a net of 56. Their strength of schedule rank is still pretty good. They're still at 52. So that does help. Because it's not like Gonzaga has not challenged themselves. We know Gonzaga's always challenged themselves. The schedule, when we all looked at it in the preseason, said, this might be one of the tougher schedules in all of college basketball. And it was supposed to be that. And it turns out it wasn't that. But now Gonzaga is going to be in a position that they're not used to. They are playing catch up. They now have the pressure that each of these games are going to mean more. And how you win these games means more than maybe it has in the last decade. Yes, they were a borderline team in 2016 and did need to win the WCC tournament to secure a spot. But this is the first time maybe it feels like you don't know. There's more uncertainty about this team maybe than there has been in a longer period of time than even that 2016 team. And the expectations over the last few years have been set so high that the idea that this might not be a certainty is just so foreign that it's hard to even wrap around the idea that it could be a reality. Mark Few has not missed the NCAA tournament as head coach. That's, again, putting it in a different perspective of there is a whole generation of Gonzaga alums, students, staff, faculty who have never seen Gonzaga miss the NCAA tournament. The last time they missed the NCAA tournament, that was 98. So I was in middle school the last time they missed the tournament. That is just to the level of the success of this program, the expectations that this program has, and there will be added pressure going into conference play to really take care of business, and especially against the teams that they now are essentially required to beat. They are now going to be required to beat USF. They will now be required to beat St. Mary's if they want to secure that Las Vegas does not become a do or die situation. And with that, there's also what's happening at St. Mary's, because they've also been up and down, up and down. They did get back on track last week. They did blow out Kent State 66-46. It was the 6th time they've held a team under 60 points. The defense has continued to carry this team. They have an adjustment defensive rating of 11th in the nation. So right back kind of where they were. Metrically, they might they're right now better than where they were a year ago. But they're much like USF, much like Gonzaga. They're kind of hovering 9-6. They have a Ken Palm of 44, a net of 52. And the two losses at home, which seemed way more crippling early on, are starting to not look as crippling anymore. Net rating wise, Weber State's at 83, Missouri State's at 97. Both of those could go up because both of them are expected to do well in conference play. Weber State is the favorite in the Big Sky. Missouri State's going to do damage in the Missouri Valley. But what has made or break what this team has done has been the offense, because the defense has been there essentially all year long. When they shoot 45% or higher, they're 7-1. When they shoot lower than 45%, they're 2-5. And in the 5 losses, it's 40%, 34, 25, 41, 43. That's kind of their dividing line. Even a little bit of offense, even a tiny bit, makes an enormous difference for this team. And as St. Mary's has kind of turned it around over in the last, 7 games or so, what really has made the difference has been the play of Augustus Marshallonis. And I talked a bit about him after the Colorado State win, and just like the difference between what he brought in that game in Boise, and now we have a little bit more of a larger sample size of the job he has done since that very, very rough start that he had to the season. And over those first 7 games, he was shooting 29% from the field, 19% from 3, 7.5 points, 2.4 assists, less than a steal a game. Since the month of December began, now he's averaging 13 points a game. He's shooting 47% from the field, 41% from 3. He's almost doubled his assist total to 4.7. He's more than doubled his steal total at 1.8 per game. He's been a completely different player. He looks like he's starting to take charge of the offense a lot more. And this has been so critical for the success of that team, because it gives them the guard that is actually going to be the reliable one, or at least has been the reliable one over the last month, especially as Aiden Mahaney has continued to struggle and hasn't yet still found his shot or how to overcome what is starting to look like a sophomore slump. Last 6 games, Mahaney is shooting just about 24% from the field. But the consistency on offense for St. Mary's is going to be what really makes or breaks them in conference play, because I think much like USF, because while I do think there's an outside chance USF can figure out the at-large scenario, I think they're closer to being where St. Mary's is, and that is you have to win the tournament in Vegas. I think that's where both teams are. Their resumes are going to be very similar, or at least not completely side by side, but metrically they're very similar. USF has the better net rating, but St. Mary's has the better Ken Palm. So there's going to, and then the other metrics will start to balance each of these teams out as well. And so for St. Mary's, it's way more critical, I think, for them to get off to a good start in conference play, because they're going to get, I think, a few more tests early on than some of these other teams are. USF, I think, starts a little bit soft before they see St. Mary's, and that's going to happen in, I think, 3 weeks or so. Because St. Mary's, these first 3 weeks, they're on the road. They're going to be at San Diego, at LMU, where they lost a year ago. Then they have Portland. They're going to be at Santa Clara, which I think is a dangerous, dangerous game for St. Mary's. And then they'll be heading up to the Hilltop to take on USF. And 4 of those first 5 games on the road. So again, just one more challenge that St. Mary's needs to be able to meet, because we already know for them, for USF, and for Gonzaga, really, it's like all 3, there is no more room for error. if you hope to have your chances at an at-large bid. Otherwise, for any of them, one more slip, one more quote mistake, and you better hope that you win in Vegas, because that is where we're very close, if not already to the point of whoever wins in Vegas is going to be the one and only WCC representative. All right. So one of the things I brought up, and I do want to talk about, is the preseason awards and who I had before the year, because I do think I have some changes I want to make. And I'll start with the awards, and I'll get to the standings. So before the season, I picked all of the WCC recognized end of season awards. So player of the year, defensive player of the year, the newcomer, coach of the year, and the sixth man. And for sixth man, I had Ben Gregg. Coach of the year was Chris Gerlefson at USF. Defensive player of the year, Jonathan Mobo. And then I had player of the year and newcomer both being Ryan Nembhard. Some of my list is going to stay the same. And then others, there's going to be some slight adjustments. And here's and this is going to, and I'm going to make a note about one thing, and I'll get to it when I mention it. So I'm going to start with the two that I'm absolutely not changing. Right now, I'm still going to keep Ben Gregg as my sixth man of the year. And I know if you go and look at his numbers, that Braden Huff, he has better stats right now than Ben Gregg. But if I think about who I trust more in a clutch situation, who do I'd rather have on the floor later in games, I'm still taking Ben Gregg right now over Braden Huff. I feel like he's going to remain cooler under pressure. I think he's brought so much to that team over the course of the last few years. Ben Gregg, to me, still remains to me as the best sixth man in the league. I'm going to make a small note on the Dominic Harris front, because yes, I know Dominic Harris has spent, to this point, predominantly coming off the bench and being that sixth man for LMU. He has started the last 3 games, and I'm going to imagine that is going to continue on into league play. So if Dom Harris does continue to come off the bench, then he is my sixth man of the year, and I would switch those two, because Dom Harris has been great for LMU. 17 points a game, 45% from 3. He is that. If I'm saying it right now, if I said award right now, I'm handing it to somebody right now, it's Dom Harris. But if I'm considering all of conference play, where I think Harris is going to switch to being a starter, then I'm going to stay put and keep Ben Gregg as my sixth man. Coach of the year. I'm sticking with my preseason pick. This is still, to me, Chris Gerlefson. Because right now, USF has done nothing to say that they're not going to be in the conversation, not in the WCC title hunt to this point. I also think to this point, they've also separated themselves from the rest of the pack, not named Gonzaga and St. Mary's. And that was one of the qualifiers I had before the year, was whichever of the not Mark Few, Randy Bennett coaches separated themselves from the pack would be the one who would get coach of the year this season. And so far, to that point, it has been Chris Gerlefson. So that's why I'm keeping him there. So those 2 picks for me, no change. This is where I'm going to do some switching around. And I'm going to start with newcomer of the year, because I had Ryan Nembhard, and I had him also as player of the year. I'm going to separate the award out, because I also have another newcomer still in my player of the year slot. But I want them to be separate guys, because I want to be able to acknowledge more than one. And I know, like, maybe that's that sort of doesn't make logical sense, but you know what? My picks, my awards, I'm doing it. So right now for newcomer of the year, I'm going to pick Adama Ball because he's been one of the more dynamic guys in the league to this point. He has played his best against some of the better teams that Santa Clara has faced. And he is the one guy in the league who just clearly looks the part of a 1A guy, clearly looks like the part of a potential NBA player. And I think that says a lot about just the work he has been able to put in, the development that they have at Santa Clara, because again, we're looking at 3 straight years of, I think Ball's going to start to creep up and up and up on some of these draft boards as we get deeper into conference play and then into the offseason. So Adama Ball would be my pick for is going to be my altered pick for newcomer of the year. Defensive player of the year. I'm switching this one up as well. And I'm going to switch it to a guy who arguably should have already had this award, arguably should have been the preseason pick to begin with, and that's Anton Watson. And we kind of know the resume for Anton Watson. If there's something that team needs him to do, he's done it. He rebounds well, he defends well, he helps well. It's like he is the ultimate team guy. And for Gonzaga, he's really been everything for them. And I think that you just look at just everything that Watson has been able to do over the course of his career. And maybe I'm doing this a little bit more as like the career award, even though he's had a great season this year. And you can take a look at just where he ranks in as far as rebounding, field goal percentage, steals, blocks. Like he's in all of these categories, top in a lot of these categories. So he completely deserves this award. So like this is where I'm going to make a switch, and I'm going to put Anton Watson as defensive player of the year. That's because the guy I did have as defensive player of the year is moving to my player of the year, and that's Jonathan Mobo. And he has been absolutely everything USF could have hoped for and then some. And I rattled off some of the numbers and where he ranks in some of the categories earlier. And I think you can't overstate just the complete impact that he has had on that team. You know, he's averaging 13.7, which is second on the team for USF. But more importantly, the 10 rebounds a game, which is first in the league. 66% field goal percentage, first in the league. 1.9 steals per game, first in the league. 1.1 blocks, fourth in the league. 3 assists a game, 10th in the league. He is, outside of scoring, which is the odd one, it's like he is in the top 10 in almost every major category in the conference, and his team has the best record in the WCC right now. And if he stays healthy and he continues to do what he's doing, I can't see how he doesn't remain completely in that conversation, especially when there's been nobody else who has stood out that much ahead of him. Metrically, he's there. We've seen him actually run the break. Like he does it all for USF. And so that's why I'm moving him to my player of the year going into conference play. So complete recap of all of that. Player of the my new my new awards on all of these. Player of the year is Jonathan Mobo. Defensive player of the year, Anton Watson. Newcomer is Adama Ball. Coach of the year, Chris Grillefson. And sixth man of the year, Ben Gregg. All right. So now to my picks from before the season. Rattle them down 1 through 9. Here's what I had. Gonzaga 1, St. Mary's 2, USF 3, LMU 4, Santa Clara 5, Portland 6, Pacific 7, Pepperdine 8, and San Diego 9. There are going to be some switches here. And I'm going to start at the bottom and I'll work my way up. So my number 9 is definitely switching, because the team who I had there, San Diego, I think has done enough to prove that they're going to be more competitive than we thought they would be. I think they've done enough to show that they're getting better as the year goes on. They have a win against Arizona State. Keep that in mind. And they are the only other team with 10 wins going into WCC play. And yeah, the schedule was incredibly soft. But this is a team that's gained some confidence. This is a team that I think is, as young as it is starting to figure some things out. And it's going to be exciting to kind of see what that looks like as we get deeper and deeper into conference play. So I'm moving San Diego out of there because I'm slipping a team all the way down, and that being Pacific. Pacific, we've seen, has been just barely better than some of the worst teams in college basketball to this point. And that's just being barely better than them at home. Pacific, I think last year overshot everyone's expectations, especially in conference play. I don't see that happening again this year. Pacific, I think, has clearly proven that they are now sitting at the bottom of the WCC. Obviously, still need to see how everybody plays, especially once we get into these familiar matchups and whatnot. But Pacific, I think, is going to sit at 9 for me. I have another team that's slipping that's going to be at 8, and that's Portland. The Pilots really haven't done much of anything this offseason or this non-conference season that shows that they have the potential to do better than that, unfortunately. And I think that's the challenge I see with Portland, is that we need to see some level of consistency, and there's been no consistency from that squad outside of Tyler Robertson. Where else are they getting help from? And it's been sporadic at best. Tyler Harris has had a nice non-conference, but an over-reliance upon some of the younger players and not getting some of the play that as expected from some of the veterans has really hurt Portland, I think, over the course of the non-conference. So I have them at 8. And I already talked already about them and how they've played better. So I'm moving, and so number 7, I'm moving San Diego up. So I'm going to slot them in at 7. Number 6 is Pepperdine. Pepperdine hasn't done anything really to impress, but they also really haven't done anything to lead you to believe that they're worse than where they were. They have 2 of the better scorers in the league, in Houston Millett and also Michael Ajayi. So there's some guys to actually look for. Malik Moore has also been off and on, actually pretty good. Javon Porter is just coming back from injury. So there's some pieces here that are going to be interesting and could keep Pepperdine out of the cellar, which is where they were a year ago. So cautiously moving Pepperdine up to 6. I had them at 8 before the year. Number 5. Small switch here. LMU is going to get moved down 1 spot to 5. While they have, like Santa Clara, had some inconsistencies, I think LMU's inconsistencies have been more consistent than Santa Clara's. And we've also seen Santa Clara get big wins against good teams. We have not seen LMU been able to pull one of those out yet. And that's part of the problem with LMU. We've seen they got close against Yale, couldn't pull it out. They played really well against Colorado State for about 2/3 of that game before it all came crumbling apart. They've looked good in spurts against good teams, but they have not been able to close that out, where Santa Clara has been able to do that. So that's where I'm just doing this flip-flop. LMU at 5, Santa Clara at 4. And I'm doing one more flip as I get to the top 3. And my flip is, this is going to make some people that probably I know I might start getting texts from people or DMs because of the way I'm going to do this. I'm moving St. Mary's to 3 and moving USF up to 2. Because of the offensive inconsistencies we have seen from St. Mary's throughout the course of the year. Defensively, we know they're one of the best. And all three, Gonzaga, USF, and St. Mary's, have been three of the best defensive teams in the country if you look at the KenPom rankings. And if you watch them play, that has been the strength of each of these teams. What is separating them to me is their offense. And USF does more things well than St. Mary's does. St. Mary's doesn't always bring it night to night on the offensive end. USF is the best shooting team in the league. They also are a good three-point shooting team. St. Mary's is not a good three-point shooting team. St. Mary's is not a good shooting team right now. And they also have been wildly inconsistent on that front. And it's in the margins for these two teams. Yes, St. Mary's is an incredibly good rebounding team. But eventually you have to put the ball in the bucket, and that is not something that we've seen all the time from this team. So that is my one switch at the top. I'm putting St. Mary's 3, USF 2, leaving Gonzaga at 1 for now. So final rundown: Gonzaga, USF, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, LMU, Pepperdine, San Diego, Portland, and Pacific. All right, and that leads me into just the games of the week, games to watch. And honestly, for this week, there are two that are catching my eye, and they're both involving LMU. It's Santa Clara at LMU, and it's St. Mary's at LMU. This is LMU's chance to really start to immediately prove that they belong in that conversation, because we have yet to see that the LMU team we thought we might in the non-conference. We haven't seen that team yet. We haven't seen them play the complete game to get these good wins. And there are two opportunities right in front of them on their home court to potentially get those wins. So this is where I will say it's like that this is a team that needs to put it together. Tom Harris needs to continue to play like he has. He's, last 7 games, 17 points per game, 45% from the field. You always have to watch out for Will Johnston. He has been a bit of the microwave for the Lions because he can score in bunches. He had 27 against Colorado State, 22 against Oakland, 15 against Nevada coming off the bench. And then for both St. Mary's and Santa Clara, already talked about it, lots of ups and downs. They need to figure out what that all looks like. Santa Clara hasn't been able to win back-to-back games since mid-November. They are coming off a loss, so that might give them a little bit of just a head start of like hitting the reset button as they go into conference play. And for St. Mary's, control the rebounding, control the glass, do just enough on offense against the Lions. And I do think there might be a little bit of revenge on their minds because they did lose at Gersten Pavilion a year ago. And I'm sure that the returners do not want to have that happen all over again in that building. All right, well, that'll do it. Long episode, but WCC play is here. Had to get it all in. So be sure to follow. Be sure to follow on social media at Post by Zach. Be sure to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, and then also like and follow on your favorite streaming services. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and I will catch you later.